The diner on Maple Street had been there for 40 years. Robert knew this because he'd been coming here almost that long himself. He was 58 now, and the red vinyl booths held memories from when his hair was dark instead of silver, when his daughter Emma was small enough to need a booster seat. Now Emma was grown, living 3 states away with a good job and her own life. His wife Sarah had passed 2 years ago. And Robert found himself eating dinner alone most nights, usually right here in booth number 7, the one by the window where you could watch the streetlights come on. It was a Thursday evening in October, the kind of evening when the air starts to cool and you can smell wood smoke from someone's fireplace. Robert had ordered his usual: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. Simple food that reminded him of better times. He was halfway through his meal when he noticed her. A woman about his age, maybe a few years younger, stood near the entrance with a boy who looked to be around 8 or 9. She was searching her purse with that particular kind of urgency that Robert recognized. He'd seen Sarah do the same thing 100 times, that moment when you realize you've left your wallet somewhere or don't have quite enough money. The boy was thin, dressed in clothes that were clean but worn. He looked up at his mother with those big, patient eyes that children get when they've learned not to expect too much. The hostess was talking to them quietly, and Robert could see the woman's shoulders sag with what looked like embarrassment. Robert had been raised to mind his own business, but something about the scene tugged at him. Maybe it was the way the boy didn't complain. Maybe it was remembering all the times when Emma was young and money had been tight, when Sarah would count pennies to make sure their daughter got a good meal. He caught the waitress's eye. Her name was Linda, and she'd worked here for 20 years. "Linda," he said quietly when she came over. "That woman and her son by the door. Tell them booth 7 has plenty of room, and their dinner's taken care of." Linda had known Robert long enough not to make a fuss about it. She just smiled that knowing smile of hers and walked over to the entrance. Robert watched as Linda spoke to the woman. He saw confusion cross her face, then something like relief mixed with hesitation. The woman looked over toward his booth, and Robert gave a small, gentle nod, not insistent, just welcoming. Linda said something else, and slowly the woman took her son's hand and walked toward the booth. "I'm sorry to intrude," the woman said when she reached the table. Her voice was soft, a little shaky. "Linda said you were kind enough to—" "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Robert said. "There's plenty of room, and honestly, I'd appreciate the company. I'm Robert." "Catherine," she said, and then looked down at her son. "This is Daniel." "Hello, Daniel," Robert said, and the boy managed a shy smile. They slid into the booth across from him. Catherine still looked uncomfortable, like she might change her mind and leave. But Daniel was looking at the menu with the quiet hope of a hungry child, and that seemed to settle it. "Order whatever you'd like," Robert said. "The meatloaf's good. So's the pot roast, and they make a chocolate milkshake that's worth the trip." Daniel's eyes went wide at the mention of a milkshake, and Catherine's expression softened. "Daniel, what do you say?" "Thank you, sir," the boy said quietly. "Robert's fine," he told him with a smile. When Linda came back, Catherine ordered carefully, a chicken dinner for herself and for Daniel, a hamburger with fries, and yes, that chocolate milkshake. Robert could tell she was still trying to keep the cost down, even though he'd made it clear he was paying. Old habits, he thought. Pride and necessity mixed together. For a few minutes, they sat in that slightly awkward silence that comes when strangers share a table. Robert ate his meatloaf. Catherine folded and refolded her napkin. Daniel sat very still, very well behaved. "I should explain," Catherine finally said. "I thought I had my wallet. I was so sure. We'd been at the library all afternoon. Daniel loves to read, and I thought it was in my purse, but I must have left it at home. I felt so foolish, standing there with my hungry son." "No need to explain," Robert said gently. "We've all had those days." "My son's hungry," Catherine said, and her voice caught just a little. "Can we stay a while?" "As long as you'd like," Robert said. Their meals came, and Robert watched as Daniel tried very hard not to wolf down his food. The boy had manners, you could tell. Catherine had raised him right, but he was clearly hungry, and that milkshake disappeared quickly. "Would you like another one?" Robert asked, and Daniel looked at his mother. Catherine started to protest, but Robert held up a gentle hand. "Please, when my daughter was his age, she could put away 2 milkshakes without blinking." Growing kids need their fuel. Catherine smiled, really smiled, for the first time since sitting down. All right, one more. But what do you say, Daniel? Thank you very much, Robert, the boy said. And this time his shyness had faded a bit. As Daniel worked on his second milkshake, conversation came easier. Robert learned that Catherine had been widowed 5 years ago. Her husband had been a teacher, taken too young by cancer. She worked 2 jobs now, cleaning houses during the day and 3 nights a week at a grocery store. Daniel stayed with a neighbor on those nights. It's not what I imagined, she said, stirring her coffee. But we manage. Daniel's doing well in school. He's smart like his father. What do you like to read? Robert asked Daniel. The boy perked up. Adventure books. And one's about space. I want to be an astronaut someday. That's a fine dream, Robert said. My daughter wanted to be a veterinarian when she was your age. Now she works with wildlife conservation. Dreams can take you places. He pulled out his phone and showed them a picture of Emma standing next to a bear enclosure at the wildlife center where she worked. She's beautiful, Catherine said. Takes after her mother, Robert said, and something in his voice must have conveyed the loss, because Catherine reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. I'm sorry, she said. 2 years now, Robert said. Some days are easier than others. Thursday dinners are usually the hard ones. We used to come here every Thursday. They sat with that for a moment, the understanding that passes between people who've known loss. Daniel had finished his milkshake and was looking at the dessert menu with careful interest. They have good apple pie here, Robert said, with ice cream. What do you think, Daniel? Should we all have a piece? The boy looked at his mother, who laughed, really laughed, and said, I think we should. Life's too short not to have pie. So they ordered pie, and it came warm with vanilla ice cream melting over the top. They ate slowly, savoring it. Robert told them about Emma's childhood, about the time she tried to bring home a stray cat and it turned out to be a raccoon. Catherine told them about Daniel's science fair project on solar systems, how he'd stayed up late making papier-mâché planets. Daniel, growing comfortable now, told Robert about his favorite book, something about kids exploring Mars. And Robert listened with genuine interest, asking questions, making the boy feel heard. The diner had filled up with the dinner crowd and then emptied again. Outside the window, full darkness had fallen. It was past 8 o'clock when they finally finished their pie. We should let you get home, Catherine said, though she sounded reluctant. I'm in no hurry, Robert said. But I imagine this young astronaut has school tomorrow. Catherine nodded and started to gather her purse. Robert caught Linda's eye and she brought the check. He added a generous tip and paid cash, waving away Catherine's protests. You've given me something tonight, he said as they stood to leave. Company, conversation. That's worth more than a meal. Outside the diner, the October air was crisp. The streetlights glowed warm against the darkness. Our car's just down the block, Catherine said. She hesitated, then said, Robert, I don't know how to thank you properly. You turned what could have been a humiliating evening into something lovely. No thanks needed, Robert said. But I do come here every Thursday. Same booth, same time. If you'd ever like to join me again, you'd both be welcome. Catherine looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw understanding there. 2 people who'd lost their partners. 2 people who knew what loneliness felt like. 2 people who just shared a simple meal and found it wasn't so simple after all. We'd like that, she said. Daniel, standing between them, looked up at Robert and said, Will you tell me more about your daughter next time, and maybe I can tell you about my new book? I'd like that very much, Robert said. He watched them walk to their car, Catherine's hand on Daniel's shoulder. Before they got in, Daniel turned and waved, and Robert waved back. Then he stood there for a moment on Maple Street, breathing in the October air. For the first time in 2 years, Thursday didn't feel quite so heavy. The diner's neon sign glowed behind him. Somewhere down the street, someone's wind chimes played a gentle melody. Robert thought about kindness, about the small gestures that change everything, about how sometimes grace comes not in grand gestures but in offering a booth, a meal, a listening ear, about how healing can begin over meatloaf and chocolate milkshakes. The following Thursday, Robert arrived at booth 7 at his usual time. He ordered his usual meal, and when Linda came over with his coffee, she smiled and said, "I set 3 places, just in case." Robert smiled back. "Thank you, Linda." He didn't have to wait long. At 6:30, the diner door opened and Catherine walked in with Daniel. The boy saw him immediately and his face lit up with a grin. They slid into the booth like they belonged there. Daniel pulled a book from his backpack to show Robert. Catherine met Robert's eyes across the table with a warmth that spoke of gratitude and perhaps the beginning of friendship. "Same as last week?" Linda asked, and Catherine laughed. "Yes, please. Though maybe we'll try the pot roast this time." "Excellent choice," Linda said, winking at Robert. And so it began. A new Thursday tradition. A table for 3 in booth number 7. A small kindness that grew into something more. Connection, companionship, and the quiet comfort of knowing you're no longer facing the evening alone. Outside, the streetlights came on one by one, pushing back the darkness. Inside, 3 people shared a meal, and the simple, profound gift of each other's company. Sometimes grace appears when we least expect it. Sometimes it looks like a mother saying her son is hungry. Sometimes it sounds like a kind voice saying there's plenty of room at the table. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, loneliness transforms into belonging, one Thursday dinner at a time.